Hello, welcome to Identifying Stroke Locations 101 with your host. I don't know what I'm doing. So, remaking this video, I had a couple people ask me to put it back up, but it bothered me too much with the audio being out of sync. So, decided to make it more condensed so it won't be 12 minutes long and try and run through it a little quicker because I just reread all this information in our textbook about strokes and interventions and what to assess for and what happens where, what happens when, what happens you know what, it's a lot. So I'm going to condense it down, make it simpler. That way you can just kind of at a glance get the gist of it. So to start off, let's go to basic cranial and brain anatomy. So I brought out Carl here. Carl is my beautiful skull I bought for Anatomy and Physio a few years ago, and he's going to be our friend here. So, we'll start with the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe of the brain, right underneath here, you can see the suture lines. But what happens here, and ignore me looking down in my book for notes, I actually have notes all over the place, look at this. So, I have whiteboard markers and I draw all over my mirrors to help me remember and study this stuff. And I also have textbook notes where I pretty much rewrite the chapters. I have other books, there's Carl, and then I have questions and crap on the wall. So it's never ending. So if I'm looking around at something, sorry. So, frontal lobe. This is the moving forward, the doing things of the brain. So what you're going to find here is your main motor area. That's what you really have to remember. Also, it's going to be Broca's speech, which is able to formulate words, and that's not related to Wernicke's, which is the more receptive side of speech. So, going from there, parietal lobes, these are the main sensory portions of the brain. And a good way to remember this is a story I have with an autistic kid who didn't speak, but you know, he was curious. He had just met me, but he was nice. But he kept on gesturing for me to like bring my head down to his level because you know I'm 6'4" and he was kind of younger and small. And so I was like, I don't know what you want, but sure. So I come down to his level and he just reaches out his hands and starts feeling the top of my head because I'm bald, and I think I was the first person he's ever seen or talked to or hung out with that didn't have any hair on the top of his head. But this area of the brain is all sensory focused. So texture, size, shape, spatial relationships, that's all happening right here, generally speaking. Next, occipital, which would be the back of the brain, this area right here, that's your main visualization center. This is where all your optic nerves go and help interpret what you're seeing into actually understanding it. Next you have the temporal, which are on the sides, and this is your main hearing centers. The receptive, that's where you get the Wernicke's speech area, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then lastly is your limbic lobe, which I know there's no brain in Carl because he's not the brightest guy in the room, but limbic is like the most inside of the brain. It kind of is around the thalamus and the hypothalamus. And I have a language warning here, so I have a pretty bad way of remembering what the limbic system's for, so just turn it off the video or mute it if you don't care to hear. But limbic sounds like limp dick, and all I know is that somebody came up to me and said, yo, you got a limp dick. I'd be like, hold up, what'd you say? You wanna... Not really, I don't get like that, but the thing with the limbic system, controls your sexuality and your emotions. So sexual function, anger, you can see how those kind of can go together. That's what happens in the limbic system. So if you're going to have some kind of cognitive dysfunction in one of your lobes, those are kind of generalized things to look for. But more focused, what our textbooks are looking for right now in our med-surg class and what the NCLEX will be looking for is, can you identify a left from a right stroke? So the biggest thing to know is that stroke symptoms are typically contralateral, which means if it happens on the right, you're going to see things on the left that are going to have issues. If it happens on the left, you're going to see things on the right. So, looking forward. We're going to talk about stroke symptoms that will happen regardless of where it's at. The only difference will be what side. Then we'll go into things that will happen on the left side of the brain if there's a stroke, and then things that will happen on the right. So things that will happen with both. Typically, you're going to see issues with motor and visual dysfunction. And so let's say, again, just remember contralateral is key. So right side of the brain gets a stroke, I'm going to have left-sided paresis or paraplegia, pretty much weakness or paralysis. That can happen, same thing with left brain, you get right-sided weakness or paralysis. And if it happens in your occipital lobe, you'll get disturbances in your visual. So my right occipital lobe is going to give me issues with my left vision field. If I get it my left occipital, I'm going to get it with my right vision field. But if it happens, like say there's an issue with the cranial nerve, which is totally different than a stroke. But if that happens with the cranial nerve and it's like closer to your eyes, it'll actually affect that side. And if you want to know the actual word for when you're having it's the same-sided visual dysfunction of both eyes. It is called, hold on, you know what, I'm not even going to try and say it. Homonymous hemianopsia. Pretty much homo, same, hemi, it's half. Remember those two key things and you'll be able to figure out the rest of the word. So, those are the things you're going to typically see with symptoms for both. Now, going in for a left, you have this really simple acronym I made up, ABCD. Does not get any more simple than that. So you have your A's. You have 4 of them actually, added one since last video. You've got aphasia, agraphia, alexia, and the new one is apraxia. So let's start with aphasia, which is going to be difficulty speaking. You have agraphia, which is writing, alexia, which is reading, and you have apraxia, which is the inability to mimic or recreate actions that you used to be able to do. So let's imagine I had hair and I wanted to comb it. Somebody handed me a comb, I would use it upside down so the blades are facing up. You know, that's one example of what apraxia would be. That's left-sided. So you're getting a lot of like purposeful movement and dysfunction that's just going down. Next, B in the ABCD, B for boring. I say this because you're going to see them get a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, a lot of, let's see what else, memory loss, guilty feelings. They're going to be cautious, and keyword, slow moving. So if you're wanting to have fun with somebody and you know they're just kind of being like, oh, I don't know, we should do that. You know what? Quit being a worrywart. Let's go. Let's do something. So that's the boring side. C for the ABCD is critical thinking. So their math, their intellect, and their memory, and their ability to plan and make executive decisions, it's going to go down the toilet. So look for that in left side. Then D is for depression. That's pretty straightforward. And the post-stroke depression is actually something to look into all on its own because it's actually really common. Now for the right side of the brain, which I consider the more artsy side, the left side is really, I consider my left brain to be like the computer and my right side to be artsy. So the right side are like keywords you're going to remember to help us remember what's happening is fun and 3D art. So we're going to say fun because the people are going to be in a state of euphoria. They're going to be having a lower impulse control. They're going to be really over-exaggerative of their own ability to have to do stuff. So you ask them like, hey, you want to go jog a mile? And be like, yeah, sure, why not? I've been able to do 5 since I was 3. That's exaggerating, but you get my point. They just don't understand. They don't understand that something's even wrong. You'll ask them like, hey, is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Nothing's wrong. And they'll just be smiling all the time for no reason. It's just a thing. So that's the fun side. The 3D art, you have issues with their ability to understand, see, anything that's kind of artistic. So let's talk about music. Let's talk about their proprioception, like where are my hands in relation to my body, where are my legs. How far away is this camera from my eyes? You know, that's the 3D side. And then the music goes down, their sense of humor, which most people don't consider an art form, but sarcasm is art in its like purest form. That all goes down the toilet. And that all is something that happens on the right side of the brain because it's cleverness. That's something that's built up over time. So that is the right side. So left, to reiterate, A, B, C, D. Right is fun and 3D art. And pause for a moment. I want to make sure I'm not skipping over anything. Nah, there's a lot more I could cover, kind of, but that's the main gist of it. So, lastly, the last thing I'll mention is if you're curious about what kind of questions we might be getting on NCLEX or on our med-surg exams, I've got 2 examples for you in one of our med-surg books. So, I'll read it for you. Which symptoms indicate the patient's stroke has affected the right hemisphere? That's the fun and 3D art side. So, option A, this is select all that apply, so you can have more than one right. A, loss of depth perception. Check. B, aphasia. No, because that's one of the A's in our ABCD for the left side. D, denies illness. That's that everything's fine, nothing's wrong. So check. D, cannot recognize faces. That is correct. I don't know why, but the book said it was. I didn't go over that too much with the recognized faces on the right side. That's more of a left with the memory, but that is kind of one of those things that might be either way. So E, loss of hearing, that might happen, especially if it happens in the temporal lobe. And last option is depression, which is no, because that's one of the ABCDs of the left side. Another question that you might see is a patient with a right cerebral hemisphere stroke may have safety issues related to which factor? Slow and cautious behavior. No, that's left side. Loss of language and analytical skills. No, because that will be more of analytical skills, is the critical thinking to the left. Alexia and agraphia. No, because that's our A's of the left as well. This is the right side. And then last option is poor impulse control, which we know is our fun side of the fun and 3D art for our right brain. So that's 2 quick examples. That's a general idea of how to decipher between left and right-sided strokes. Thanks for watching, and I made it to 12 minutes again. I don't know how, whatever. Have a nice morning, day, evening, whenever you're watching it. Bye.